Okay, this video is going to walk you through some of the ideas from my paper on Introduction to Philosophy, a Christian Worldview, and the Problem of Relativism. Specifically, I'd like to start with some ideas about a worldview. In the paper here, I give a few definitions of worldviews. Worldview is a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart, expresses a story or a set of propositions about reality that gives us a foundation on which we live, move, and have our being. That's from James Sire. Another one is from David Nagel. These are both Christian philosophers. Worldview is a semiotic phenomenon, a system of signs that gives us a framework within which people think, reason, and know. And another definition, I think slightly more philosophical, is a worldview is an ordered set of propositions about life's important questions. So taking these three definitions of what a worldview is, I try to give three main points about a worldview. Worldview tells us about reality. Worldview deals with what is real. And a worldview is like a map that's in our mind. It's a map of the real. These are maps in your mind that tell you how the world is supposed to be. Now, a map and a worldview has practical implications, right? A map, if you have a map or a GPS or Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever, you're trying to find your way somewhere. And so you rely on your map. Your map is supposed to tell you how things are, and by means of that map, it's supposed to guide you to your destination. So there's a practical implications of a worldview. A worldview is something that helps you live well. Now, a map, like a worldview, can either be true or false, right? Some maps are accurate. They tell you exactly how things are supposed to be. Other times maps are, well, they're faulty. They're pretty close, right? Good enough. If you're just trying to know, which area is north of what, that might be okay, but it might not be fine-grained enough. So some maps are accurate, some maps are inaccurate. And, you want to make sure that your worldview, like your map of how things are, either reflects or doesn't reflect the world. That is, you want to make sure that your worldview is true. What you want to shoot for is a worldview that actually tells you how reality is. Failure to do that can be disastrous. A worldview is like a map. There's a map in your mind that helps you live your life well and to deal effectively with reality. So the rest of this video, what I want to walk you through is what exactly a worldview, or how exactly a worldview connects with philosophy. So philosophy literally means a love of wisdom. And now there's all kinds of different loves, and philosophy specifically is philo. And philo is, in Greek, friendship. And this is a different type of love. There are other types of loves, like lover's love, eros, or unconditional love, or affection, storge, right? But philosophy is a friendship. Philosophy is friendship with wisdom, where we think of wisdom as a person. So the main activity in a friendship, right? Friendships only exist when there's common activities. It's really hard to have a friend with whom you have nothing in common. But philosophy is friendship with wisdom. And so if you have a friend, you're going to do things together. And your friend, wisdom, thinking of wisdom as a friend, will be someone who guides and directs you and helps you develop the map in your mind, helps you get a firm, accurate account of the nature of reality. And so wisdom is often personified. And in the Bible, this is also true. Wisdom is thought of as a person. And for us, this might be a little bit hard to think of, but in the book of Proverbs, the ancients had no trouble thinking of wisdom as a person. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, wisdom calls out and raises her voice. And the ancient Romans, in addition to the ancient Jewish people, had no problem considering wisdom as a person. In a book we're not reading for this class called The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. Boethius was a Christian who was martyred actually for his faith, for trying to do what was right. Very similar to Socrates, who we'll look at later in the semester. But he has a dialogue with Lady Philosophy, Lady Wisdom, who guides him through his imprisonment. He was actually on death row and then killed for trying to help do what is right in the political realm. So there are three kinds of activities that you'll engage with to develop your worldview. So your worldview is like a map, and it's got three broad layers to it, or three areas of inquiry that philosophy, Lady Wisdom will help you with. And these are three ologies. You know what an ology is, right? The study of something. So the first ology is ontology, the second ology is epistemology, and the third ology is axiology. So three ologies you're going to develop for your worldview as part of your overall philosophy, your own personal philosophy, your own map of reality. And the reason for these three areas is because these are the broadest kinds of questions that human beings can ask. These are the broadest areas of human life. So this next section of the paper deals with kind of a Christian approach to the parts of a worldview. And in it, I try and connect Jesus to these areas. That is, what connection does Jesus have to ontology, epistemology, and axiology? So in order to do that, though, I think you have to ask two questions ahead of time. Number one, are the biblical accounts of Jesus's divinity true? And uh, and does the Bible have something to say about this? And I think the answer is yes. So to defend a yes answer to the question of is the Bible true, I think you have to do two things. One, I think you have to give good reasons to think that God exists. Now we're going to do that later in the semester in our course. And I think as a Christian, Christians are supposed to have faith, but faith is not just blind belief, or it's not believing in something you know ain't so, right? Faith is not just belief for the sake of belief. Faith is rather something like having good reasons for the beliefs that you have. Or maybe even better, Greg Koukl puts it in his book. Greg Koukl has a little book called The Story of Reality. It's a great book, very easy to read. I almost required it for this class, but we have enough reading to do as it is. And it's by a fellow named Greg Koukl. Greg Koukl. And in it, he talks a little bit about faith. And I think, I don't know if this quotation is exact, but one of the things he says faith is active trust in what you have good reasons to believe. So when I talk about, in this paper, when I talk about Jesus being connected to a worldview or to philosophy, and I talk about the biblical connections and faith being involved there, what I want to focus on is these good reasons, the good reasons, right? My hope is that you will have faith in Christ, not because you just believe it, or your grandmother told you so, or it gives you a good feeling, or whatever, but because there's good reasons to believe in Christ. That is, there's good reasons to follow Jesus Christ. If there aren't good reasons to follow Jesus Christ, I'm not sure that you should consider it as highly as you should if there were good reasons. And so, in fact, I think there are good reasons to believe in God and follow Jesus, and some of those we'll deal with in the class. But then secondly, in addition to proving that God exists, or giving good reasons to believe that God exists, I think you also have to give a defense of the reliability of the biblical text. Now, again, I'm not going to do that in this paper, but I think if you look into it, if you want to take the time to look into whether or not there are good reasons to believe that the Bible is accurate, an accurate account of the historical realities of Jesus, his life, his virgin birth, his life, the miracles that he did, the teachings that he gave, his death and his resurrection from the dead and his ascension into heaven, I think that there's excellent reasons to believe these things. And again, I'm not presenting those in this video. But if you look into it, I think you'll find that any serious inquirer who does look into it or has looked into it has found the truth of these things, that there are good reasons for the Christian faith. So if I'm going to connect Jesus to these areas, then I think I have to make that case antecedently. I'm not doing that here. I'm just assuming or presupposing, or rather assuming that that can be done. So ontology. So what are the three parts of a worldview? And the first part, well, the three parts are, there's three of them: ontology, ontology, 3 ologies, epistemology, and axiology. Epistemology, if I can spell here, and axiology. So there's 3 axiology. 1, 2, 3. Ontology, epistemology, and axiology. All right. So we're going to walk you through each of these, talk a little bit about what they are, talk a little bit about how they're connected to a Christian worldview, and a little bit about how they're related to each other. So here we go. All right. So ontology is the broadest kind of question, or deals with the broadest kinds of questions that human beings can ask. It deals with the question of what is real. What is the ultimate nature of reality, or what is being or existence? Being or existence. In Greek, the word on means existence. So ontology is literally it's the study of being, or the study of existence. So this seems like a pretty big question, but everyone's familiar with it in one way or another. You all know what's real. Trust me, you do. Especially when it comes to money. People are very sure about the reality of their money, especially when they're shortchanged. We'll give an example of that later on when we talk about relativism. But if you pay for a coffee with a $10 bill, or let's say a $20 bill, pay for a $5 coffee with a 20, and someone only gives you back $5. I'm no math major, but usually I know that there's something wrong with reality at this point. Namely, reality is not what it's supposed to be. There's supposed to be an extra $10 that are real here on the counter, or in my hand, regarding my change. Or if you're not paid, for example, for the number of hours you work, you know that those hours were real, and you have your time card to prove it, and you know that the money isn't in your bank account or in a check or in cash from your employer. So people know what reality is. It's not a super deep question. I mean, it is a deep question, but it's a commonsensical one to come to an answer to. So like for example, if I just asked you to distinguish between what is real and what is not real, right? So ontology deals with the question of what is real, or what exists. And if I asked you to say, take a piece of paper out and write down on one side of the paper things that are real things, and things that are not real things, could you do that? Like, what would you put on the real things list, right? You might put something like chairs, right? Or computers, or people, or stars, right? And you could go on for quite a while like this. Things that are real. Not real things, I don't know, you might put something like unicorns. Now, unicorns could be real, right? But in fact, there don't seem to be any. We can think about them, so our thoughts of unicorns are real, but a thought of a unicorn is not the same thing as a unicorn any more than a thought of a double-double, or as I'm partial to, habit burger, is as real as an actual habit burger. The thought of a burger and a burger are two different things, especially if you want a burger for lunch. You would rather have the burger than the idea of the burger. So unicorns might not be real. I don't know. What else do you put on the not real side? The Easter Bunny. Sorry if this is news to some of you. Um, we'll talk about Santa Claus later on in the class. Just a trigger warning there. The Easter Bunny. Unicorns, the Easter Bunny. You might say something like, interesting philosophy classes here are not real. I mean, they could be real, but they're not real. But you could go on in a list a whole bunch of things. Leprechauns, hydras, or I don't know, werewolves or vampires or whatever. All right, things that could be real but aren't. Now that you've got your list, the next question, if you're doing ontology, is if you think about things that are real and things that are not real, right? What's the difference between these two? What's the difference between these two? Now, if you're doing that, you're really doing ontology now, right? If you're thinking about what the difference is between what's real and what's not real, now you're doing ontology. So, for example, what's the difference between a unicorn and a chair? right? We can think of both things, but one of them you can sit in, and the other one you can't ride. Uh, one of them you could sit on, right? You could sit on a chair, but you can't sit on a unicorn because there aren't any. So, what's the difference between the unicorn and the chair? Right? Now, you have to think long and hard about that. And different philosophers have come up with different ideas about this. But one way to think about it is that a chair actually exemplifies the properties that it has, right? So chairs, for example, exemplify properties, and unicorns don't. Or if you want to put dogs here, right, on the real thing, right? There is the property of being a dog is actually exemplified. It shows up, and you can point to it, and you can, if you have a dog around you, you can pet it or have it fetch or watch it play or whatever. But you can't do that with a unicorn. Unicorns don't exemplify any properties. Now, you can think of the properties of a unicorn, but they don't show up anywhere. Um, so this is a tough thing to think about. It's pretty commonsensical, right? When you're shortchanged, you know that there's no exemplification of money on the counter. Uh, you know that money is not there, and you're upset about it, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're a generous tipper. I have a friend of mine who tips like 40% on everything. I'm like, dude, he's got more money than I do, I guess. But anyway, so you know that you know when things are real and when things aren't, because you know when things exemplify their properties and when they don't. Now, some things are hard to tell if they're real. There's a lot of debate about some things, like the afterlife, or the existence of God, or the soul, or even mathematical realities. They might just be useful fictions that we talk about. But my own view is that all of those things are real. Numbers are real, mathematical entities are real, God is real, the soul is real, and so is the afterlife. But some people don't believe in those things. But whether or not you believe in something is different from its being real. Things can be real regardless of your belief in them. And we'll talk more about that later. So ontology is the first area of philosophy. Now we're gonna spend a full 3 weeks in ontology, and we'll have more to say about things that are real coming up. So another thing about ontology is that it's deeply connected to Jesus. So Jesus is the cause of all things. He is the one that is behind the existence of everything and for whom everything exists. And I draw that out on the paper. You can take a look at that. Okay, the second area of philosophy is epistemology. And epistemology has to do with knowledge. Episteme in Greek is knowledge. So epistemology is the study of knowledge, and it deals things with like what is truth, how do we know, what are the limits and the extent of knowledge, where does knowledge come from, does knowledge come through science alone, can it come through authority, what about divine knowledge, knowledge of God. These are all things we're going to touch on. We're going to spend a good chunk of time, especially on truth. On truth, right? Truth has come on hard times recently. I've heard people say that we live in a post-truth world. And I'm not even sure what that would mean, right? Again, suppose you're shortchanged. If someone, shortchanged you at Starbucks or wherever, would you just say, "Oh, well, that's just true for you. I don't mind if you don't give me my money because that's true for you." I don't know. I'd be happy to serve you coffee if you want to believe those kinds of things. Maybe you think that truth is just relative to how you feel. If you believe that, how do you manage to catch an airplane or catch an Uber somewhere or show up to work on time? I mean, if you came to work and you just said, well, to your boss, if she asks you why you're late, and you say, well, I show up whenever you want, and showing up at 9 for work is just true for you, boss. Right? Would you? What if you were boss and your employee said that to you? That's just true for you. I don't think we live in a post-truth world. I think common sense everybody believes in truth. They just don't want to believe the things that are true sometimes. I'm unwilling to believe often things that are actually true. But things can be true regardless of how I feel about them. I hope you think that. Life is rather difficult if you reject that. But in the paper here, I talk about Jesus saying having something to do with truth. Jesus says that he is the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. And so that's something you need to think deeply about. Paul also talks about Jesus being the one in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So there's a deep connection between Jesus and epistemology. All right, finally, the third area of philosophy is called axiology, and it's got two parts to it: ethics and aesthetics. Aesthetics is down here somewhere. Ethics and aesthetics. Sometimes aesthetics is spelled with an A. It's kind of a fancy spelling. I usually just spell it with an E. But axiology deals with value, and it deals with questions like what is valuable, what are things that are ultimate goods. And in our course, we're going to spend a couple weeks on each of these areas. In ethics, we're going to ask questions like, what is the good life and who's the good person? Really? I mean, like, what is a good life? Is a good life, does a good life consist in having a 3,000 square foot house in a nice suburb with 2.7 kids and a Labradoodle? Uh, is that the good life? Does a good life consist in giving everything you have away to the poor and taking a vow of poverty and obedience and following God and living somewhere outside your comfort zone? Does is a good person? I mean, who's a good person, right? I mean, are there any people in the world today outside of your family members that you could point to and say, "I hope my children end up like them"? Um, what is a good person? Are you a good person? Do you have a good life? Uh, does going to CBU help you have a good life and be a good person? I hope that it does. And my hope and prayer is that thinking about these things will help you in your life. So Jesus also is connected deeply to the good life and being a good person. Many people have found this over the several thousand years that Jesus has been with us and since he rose from the dead. Jesus says that he in him is life, and people who follow him will have a full life. And in fact, the Apostle Paul talks about dikaiosune, righteousness coming through Jesus Christ, and complete justice. Righteousness and justice often go together. There's a deep concern about justice in our culture at the present moment, and many people demand it, but very few people understand what it is or where to find it. But Jesus claims that it's found in himself. Everything we need for life and living well comes through him, according to his claims. How about beauty? Aesthetics is the study of beauty. Beauty. Is beauty only skin deep? Is beauty just in the eye of the beholder? Well, if you're an aesthetician, those are the kinds of philosophical questions you're going to deal with. And we're going to spend a couple weeks on that, dealing with beauty. I think beauty is real. I don't think it's just in the eye of the beholder. That's a pretty controversial claim. Even Christians struggle with this idea that beauty is not just how we feel. You know, it's possible for something to be beautiful and not people not feel that it's beautiful. In fact, my own belief is that you, as a human being, are beautiful because you're made in God's image. And even if you don't feel that you're beautiful, even if other people don't think you're beautiful, you are beautiful because of who you are, because of the kind of being that you are. Our bodies are sometimes beautiful, sometimes not. The older I get, the more I realize that the body's a fleeting thing. Now, we're never meant to be without our bodies, but this earthly body is fading pretty quickly. Little things go wrong all the time. There's the beauty of the body, which is one thing, but there's the beauty of a person. And we'll get into this later in the semester, but I just want you to know up front that you're a beautiful person because you're made in God's image. And that's not something anyone can take away from you, regardless of the deficiencies of my body. Because I'm made in the image of God, I am a beautiful person, and so are you. All right, so we'll deal with beauty later on in the semester, and I try and talk about how Jesus is connected to beauty. One more final point, and this is the notion of logic. If you want to think well about goodness, truth, and beauty, you have to be able to think. Logic deals with right thinking. And then finally, there are different philosophies of, and you can read about these in the paper. This video, I'm going to walk you through the part of my paper on relativism and the problem of it. So we left off last time with kind of the three broad areas of philosophy. We looked at ontology, which deals with the questions of what is or what is real. Epistemology, what is truth or how do we know things. Axiology deals with value, especially moral value, which is ethics, and non-moral value of aesthetics. Ethics deals with questions like what is good. Aesthetic deals with questions like what is beauty. So here's what I want to ask. Do you think that there are right answers to these kinds of philosophical and worldview questions? Do you think that there is a right answer to the question of what is ultimate reality? Or do you think there's a right answer to the question of what is truth? Or do you think that there's a right answer, or at least a possibility of right answers, to the question of what is the good life and who's a good person, or what is good? What about beauty? Do you think there's a right answer to what is beauty, to what beauty actually is, or which things are beautiful and which things aren't? Do you think there are right answers to those questions? Now you might wonder, well, that's kind of odd. So let me give you an analogy rather, right? Suppose I ask you this question: how tall are you? How tall are you? Right? That's a pretty straightforward question, and you could probably answer it. But now let me ask you a question about this. This question is there a right answer to how tall you are? Right? Is there a right answer to how tall you are? Now, that's not meant to be a terribly complicated question, but this question is a question about this one. The bottom question, is there a right answer, is a question about the question regarding your height. So, do you think there's a right answer to how tall you are? Now, you might say, well, when? Right? Because I'm a different height today than I was, say, when I was 2, or when you were 9 months old, or when you were 6 weeks old, or whatever, right? So how tall are you? Now you can give an answer to that. And do you think there's a right answer to that question? Now I think probably you do. Before you take a philosophy class, you probably think that there's a right answer to how tall you are. And actually I agree that there is a right answer to how tall you are. But what about philosophy questions, right? Do you think there are right answers to questions about beauty, about goodness, and about truth, and about morality? Now, I actually believe that there are right answers to these questions, and we can know them. But one way to respond to this meta question, are there right answers to philosophical questions, is to say no. Some people say no, there are no right answers. Rather, there are just relative answers, only relative answers. In other words, yeah, there's answers, and maybe they're right, but they're only right relative to you, to how you feel about them, or to your culture, or to your religion, or to your political party, or your gender, or um, your tribe, or whatever, right? So there's right answers for Christians about God. There's right answers for atheists about the good life. There's right answers for some cultures about what beauty is, but there's not like a right answer that uh, everyone recognizes as right, or that could be recognized as right. Um, like it's not like height, right? So the answer to the question, how tall are you? That kind of question, yeah, there's a right answer and everyone could agree on it. Even if we measured differently, like some people measure in inches and feet and other people measure in centimeters and meters or whatever, there is a right answer to that kind of question. But philosophy, nah, there's no kind of right answers. This view is called relativism. It's called relativism. And I'm going to explain here in the paper that it's a problem, that it's not a reasonable view. The idea that there are no right answers to philosophical questions about goodness, truth, and beauty, and the nature of reality is not a reasonable approach to philosophy. In other words, I want you to, at the end of this video, and after reading this part of the paper, I want you to reject relativism, or at least be open to the possibility that it's false. So here I'm going to give you some reasons to reject relativism. Before we do that, just take a look at these slogans of relativism. You'll hear these often. I call them slogans because they're things you might hear. You might hear someone say, well, who are you to judge? Right? Or someone might say, well, that's true for you, but not true for me. Or you might hear someone say, don't push your views on others. Don't push your morality on me. Those are sure signs of relativism because they express the idea that there are no right answers to questions about goodness, truth, and beauty. So let me give you 3 reasons why you shouldn't be a relativist. Let me give you some reasons to reject relativism. Here's the first one. Relativism rests on a weak argument, right? A lot of people think that relativism is true because of the fact that people differ in their philosophical beliefs. Now, look, it is a fact. People do differ in their beliefs about religion, about God, about the afterlife, about the soul, about reality, about how we know things, about how the world actually is. People differ in their beliefs, right? You probably, whether you liked it or not, have recently spent a lot of time with your family, cooped up indoors. And especially around the holidays, you end up being with family members you don't normally see, and especially during an election year, um, you run into people that have very different philosophical beliefs than you do. And you might conclude from this that there's just no right answers to philosophical questions because of this. And the question then becomes, is that a reasonable inference, right? Does it follow from the fact that people differ in their philosophical beliefs that there are no philosophical truths? And my my claim in this is no. Right. Now, this premise is a fact. This is a fact. People actually do differ, and I just gave you some examples of that here in the paper. But does it follow from the fact that people differ that there are no right answers? And my claim in the paper is going to be no. And I give this example. People differ in their geographical beliefs. Does it follow that there are no geographical truths? And the answer is obviously no. Right? If you're driving with a group of friends and you can't agree on which way north is, maybe your GPS is broken and you're trying to figure out which way north is because you're trying to drive home and you don't see a sign that says which way north is, uh, and you all differ, does it follow that there's no right answer to which way is north? No, right? Or imagine you're driving in your car, right, and your gas gauge gets really low, and maybe it's broken. Maybe you realize, oh man, my gas gauge is broken, and so everyone in your car starts disagreeing about uh, how much gas is in the tank of your car. Does it follow from the fact that you disagree about how much gas is in the tank of your car that there's no right answer to how much gas is in the tank of your car? No. Or suppose there's a dispute about how tall you are. Right? Your aunt thinks that you're a certain height, your cousin thinks you're another height, and your sister thinks you're a third height altogether, and they all differ. Right? Does it follow that there's no right answer about how tall you are? No, not at all. Commonsensical, just thinking about that would tell you that doesn't follow. So, from the fact that people differ in their beliefs, it does not follow that there are no right answers about those questions. And the same thing is going to apply to philosophy. Now, you might say, well, philosophy is not the same thing as measuring height. Yeah, that's true. But I'm not talking about the content of our beliefs. We're just talking about from the fact that people differ about beliefs, regardless of the content, does it follow that there's no right answer? Clearly, it doesn't. So if it doesn't in some areas, it's gonna affect other areas too, right? Or it's gonna be the same thing in other areas too. From the fact that people differ about something, regardless of the content, whether it's height or beauty or goodness or truth or how which way north is, doesn't follow that there's no right answers to that area of inquiry. So that's one reason to reject relativism. Relativism doesn't follow from a difference of belief. Now, that argument just shows that relativism doesn't follow from a difference of belief, but it doesn't show that relativism is actually itself false. This next argument does just that. This next argument shows that relativism is self-refuting. So what is a self-refuting claim? Well, it's a claim that is itself contradictory. For example, take this sentence. There are no sentences longer than 5 words. Is that claim true or false? Well, it's false. Now suppose that were the only sentence that ever existed, right? How many words are in it? Well, there's 8 words in it, right? There's 8 words in this sentence. Therefore, it is self-refuting. It refutes itself. Now, relativism is like that, right? If I say there are no right answers to philosophical questions, what am I doing? I'm telling you something that's true. I'm telling you how things are. I'm telling you what we know, and I'm telling you what you should believe. But that, of course, deals with ontology, epistemology, and axiology. I'm telling you, you should believe this, and that it's true that there are no right answers. But how can it be true if there are no right answers? How can that claim itself be true? Of course it can't, if there are no right answers. So think about the slogans of relativism. Don't push your views on me. Right? How is that self-refuting? Well, I'm pushing my view on you if I tell you don't push your views on others. Right? If someone says to you, who are you to judge? You should reply to them, who are you to judge? Who am I to judge? Now that just might make your head hurt thinking about it, right? Some of you will get this later on today after you've listened to this video, right? In other words, if I tell someone, who are you to judge? I'm really judging them. But I'm saying that because I'm a relativist, and I don't think there are right answers, so I don't think they should judge, but I'm judging them. So I do think there are right answers, namely that we shouldn't judge people. wow, this is really self-refuting. And if something's self-refuting, that means it's contradictory and it means it's false. Therefore, you should let this idea go, free your mind, and be open to the possibility of right answers to the deepest questions in your worldview. Because in the rest of this class, I'm going to assume that relativism is false. I'm not just assuming it. I've given you an argument to show that it's false, and you should not be a relativist. Now you can be, of course, you can believe whatever you want, but it's not a reasonable view. And here's one more reason to think it's not a reasonable view. It's in fact unlivable. You can't live as a relativist. Just try it. Try to go to Starbucks and get shortchanged, and then have the barista or whatever say to you, "That's true for you that you got shortchanged." I mean, would you be okay with that? Suppose the manager comes out and is like, "Hey, what's the problem?" And you're like, "I got shortchanged," and they're like, "Well, that's just how you feel. There's no right answers. This is. I mean, who are you to judge us anyway, right? We've got our culture over here. This is how we practice ethics. You've got yours over there. And you can't judge us." But you're like, "Oh man, I can't judge these people. I guess I'll just have to go my way." Probably not. I don't think you would do that at all, and you would probably be upset about it and try and get your money back some way. Why? Because there are right answers in ethics about shortchanging people. It's not a good thing to shortchange people, or it's not a good thing to have been shortchanged. All right, so there's my three reasons to reject relativism, and neither one of these, none of these, um, I don't think any of these reasons can be overcome. Relativism is unlivable. It's self-refuting. I think this is the strongest argument. And then, of course, it doesn't follow from the fact that people differ about their views in philosophy. Now, rejecting relativism doesn't tell you what you should believe about the right answers, right? Rejecting relativism doesn't tell you whether God exists or not, whether the good life involves being a virtuous person, doesn't tell you what the limits of knowledge are, doesn't tell you whether science is the only thing that we can know, doesn't tell you the nature of beauty. It doesn't do any of that. Rejecting relativism simply answers the meta question, are there right answers to philosophical questions, by rejecting the negative view. That is, by saying the idea that there are no right answers is false. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that, yeah, maybe there are some right answers. And the purpose of this class and the rest of the semester is for us to go and find them. That is, rejecting relativism opens up the possibility of finding the right answers. And that's what we're going to do the rest of the semester. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Stay psyched, Grom. You.